Okay. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם וביום השביעי שבת וינפש שבת וינפש שבת וינפש ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת שזאת את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ברוך אתה אדוני Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagofen, amen l'chaim. Okay. Good Shabbos, everyone. Torah portion is Yitro. And it's the first of two times in the Torah where we get the list of the Decalogue, also known as the Ten Commandments. And today I want to focus on one of them. And so this is going to be maybe a little bit of a different type of class than we usually do because we usually look at the Torah primarily from what I would call an agadic interpretation, which means we look at the story and the worldview and the idea of the Torah, and we try to come up with some sort of Dvar Torah. Oh, yeah. Sure. Okay. Yes. Yeah, we just got that. Thank you. I forgot how from this group is. Okay, here we go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. Okay, so today I want to spend time, instead of looking so much from an agadic interpretation, which agadic means the story. In modern Hebrew it means legend, but it really means the story of the Torah. And today I'll focus more on the halacha of the Torah. Halacha means the actual Jewish law. So we don't really do halachic classes where we just look at the law and try to dissect what the Torah is telling us and how it's been understood throughout the ages by people who think about these things and how it affects us today. But today I would like to do that. So, if you're in rabbinical school, there might be some classes that were called Midrash or Drash or Agadic, and there'd be other classes that are more halachic, where you're just dealing with the law. So one of the differences between Orthodox rabbinic school and Reform rabbinic school is in the Orthodox rabbinic school, you spend a lot more time on classes like this. However, one of the things that we think about, if you think about, like, who's a good Jew? What does it mean to be a good Jew? Some people say, like someone said, this is one of the things that I hate the most when someone says, I grew up really Reform. Oh, so really Reform, you went to Shabbos every Friday night, you made Shabbos. I mean, you drove. You did Shabbos every Shabbat. You studied Torah, maybe not every morning, but a few times a week. That's really Reform, because that's what a good Reform Jew should do. Oh, no, I think you misunderstood. Really Reform meaning I didn't do anything. No, I understood. I'm just trying to teach you. So, how do you tell how good of a Jew someone is? What I've always thought was hilarious? When horrible people who are devout in their religion. Sometimes you see, like, in gangster movies when they go to church, or they cross themselves before they shoot someone. Right? So. And this is in every religion, right? You had it in Israel, Orthodox Jews who say a blessing before they throw a stone at your car because you're driving on Shabbat. Anything in the... So I would say, Jesus looking down saying, crossing yourself before you, shot Mo Green or whoever, that doesn't really move me. That's not what I meant, when I was teaching my okay. So there is all of the ritual, but there's also the ethical and the moral. And the Torah teaches that too. So in other words, when we look at the Ten Commandments, if you think about the Ten Commandments for a second, the first three deal with monotheism. We generally don't have such a problem with that. Okay? You have one God. You don't feel this huge draw to go home after this, study Torah here, daven here. You drive by a Hindu temple and say, I could use a little bit more. I'm going in. No, that doesn't happen. It was a thing that used to happen. God removed the inclination for... So the first three were generally okay. Number 4, keep Shabbat. Okay, so that's open to interpretation. But we're here. The 5th one depends on your parents. I don't know, maybe you don't like, I don't know. But honor your mother and father. Most of us, right? You can understand it. And it has nothing to do, you don't think of that commandment really as how good of a Jew you are. But it is the 5th commandment. Okay, number 6, we're Orthodox, right? We don't kill. Gesundheit. No? Okay. I thought it was a shvarim. I was waiting for the 3rd. Yeah. All right. Okay. It was just 2 tequillas. All right. Okay. Okay, so we don't kill. So the 6th commandment, do not kill, right? We're Orthodox, right? We don't do it. We're very machmir on that one. Okay, number 7, no adultery. Okay, hopefully that's not an issue. Number 8, do not steal, which really means do not kidnap. Probably none of you have kidnapped anybody, right? Number 9, don't lie in court. Scott, any? They do it? No, all right, we're good there. All right. So, when you think of the first 9, with the exception of Shabbat, it's not necessarily what you think of when you think about are you a good Jew or not. These are, the first 3 you don't really think about because we don't worship other gods. Number 4 is keep Shabbat. We'll leave that one out. Number 5, honor your mother and father. That's any family. Number 6, 7, and 8, kill, steal, adultery. Okay, we don't do that. Number 10 is do not covet. Okay? Do not covet. Lo tachmod. Do not be jealous of things that other people have. So none of these things that we talk about are necessarily, if someone said, well, are you a good Jew? Usually what you think about is, do I fast on Yom Kippur? Maybe do I give tzedakah to Jewish charities? Do I have a Passover Seder? Do I go to High Holy Day? Those are you think more of ritualistic type things. But how good of a Jew you are is very dependent on how you handle the moral guidance of the Torah as well. And so one of them that I want to focus on today is really, I think, probably the one, there's really only 3 of the 10 commandments that we're really dealing with. I mean, the first 3, probably making statues of other gods is not something you're dealing with, right? Probably worshiping other gods. So for the first 3, you're not really dealing with them. Shabbat, okay, let's leave Shabbat where it is. Honor your mother and father, okay. Killing, murdering, and adultery, hopefully that's something that you're not doing. If you are with those 3, I have office hours. Right. So, but hopefully that's not something you're dealing with. Most likely you're not lying in court that frequently. You're all lawyers, so I don't know, maybe you've figured it out. Maybe you've figured out how to do that. But actually, it doesn't refer to the lawyers, it refers to the people giving testimony. The lawyers can ask whatever they want. The 9th commandment is don't give false testimony in court. So I'm pretty certain that that's not something we're dealing with. But you live around here. There's a lot of nice things. You might covet. You might look and say, boy, I wish I had that. Or, I wish I had the relationship with my family that guy has. Or I wish I had that car. Or I wish I didn't have heart disease. Whatever, because you see someone else who's running 12 marathons, whatever. These are things that you actually deal with. So what I want to do today is dissect the 10th commandment, lo tachmod, do not covet.
What's the difference between coveting and admiring?
We're going to get to it. We're going to get to it, yeah. Richard? It's part of the question that the rabbis ask.
Somewhere along the line, I learned that there were positive and negative aspects of all of these urges. You could love, but love is a good thing, but it could also be smart.
For sure.
Okay, so there's both sides to all of them, with the exception of
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question.
Okay.
One cannot argue
Oh.
one's feelings.
Do you have by the way, we haven't started yet, so the chances are that we're going to answer all of your questions. So you might want to wait for the class, but anyway. Yeah. We need a mic. Do we have a mic around anywhere? No. Oh, they didn't put one out. If you're at home, we'll get to it. Yeah.
So when it says lo tachmod,
Yeah.
that tells you should not feel that you are covering something, whatever, materialistic, whatever. How does one argue with one's feelings? The question is, what do you do with that urge?
We're going to get to it. Okay. So, yeah. I prepared it. Okay. Okay. Now, one problem, some of these sources are in a foreign language. And it just takes so long to translate them, even though it's not much, so I didn't do it. But I'll translate it for you in the class, and if you don't believe my translation, we have a few Hebrew speakers here who can prove me wrong. If you can hold me to the truth that I'm reading what they say. Okay, does everyone have a sheet? No. Okay, I didn't expect this onslaught. So maybe there's plenty in the back. How about that? All right, shkoyach. All right, chapter 20, verse 1, Exodus. We have a few minutes left, so let's take a look at it. Chapter 20, verse 1. No, I'm sorry they didn't put the microphones out. if you're at home, you don't have to email me or text me. They didn't put the mics out. I don't have them. But I'll try to repeat all the questions that we have. Okay, Norman.
God spoke all these words, saying, I, the eternal, am your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods besides me. You shall not make for yourself a sculptured image, or any likeness of what is in the heavens above, or on the earth below, or in the waters under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the eternal, your God, am an impassioned God, visiting the guilt of the parents upon the children, upon the third and upon the fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing kindness to the thousandth generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not swear falsely by the name of the eternal your God, for the eternal will not clear one who swears falsely by God's name. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the eternal your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or daughter, your male or female slave, or your cattle, or your stranger who is within your settlements. For in 6 days the eternal made heaven and earth and sea, and all that is in them, and then rested on the seventh day. Therefore the eternal blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor your father and your mother, that you may long endure in the land that the eternal your God is assigning to you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor male nor female slave, nor ox nor ass, nor anything that is your neighbor's. All the people witness the thunder.
Okay, so that's it. Those are the 10. If you're at home, we've read the 10 Commandments. So if you're in a small town walking by a courthouse, you'll recognize what all the fuss is about. Remember those issues? All right, it doesn't matter. Okay, so I just want to dissect here verse 14 and just look closely at it. You shall not covet your fellow's house. You shall not covet your fellow's wife, his manservant, his maidservant, his ox, his donkey, nor anything that belongs to your fellow. So they tell you a few things, but I guess they say in the future, on the outside chance that anyone actually owns something besides a donkey or people, then it adds, nor anything that belongs to your fellow. Now, what I just want to do for a second is to point out that the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, is repeated again in the Torah later in Deuteronomy chapter 5. And over there, when they get to the 10th commandment, there's another phrase that's added that's not here. And so if you look at the two places that the 10 commandments are mentioned, and you see that there's another little phrase mentioned in Deuteronomy that's not mentioned here, you can make a distinction. And from that distinction, maybe you could learn something. So it's on the sheet. It's Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 18. This is the second time that the Decalogue is mentioned. And over there it says, you men shall not cover your neighbor's wives, your neighbor's wife. You know, women never covet other men. They're so perfect that the Torah couldn't even conceive that that's something that could happen. Okay, right. Because the men would just kill them if they did it. Right? That's adult, right? They're not allowed to do that. So, but the men, you could maybe get it, well, we'll see how, I mean, it depends how good your lawyer was for the men. For the women, there's not much you could do. Likewise, none of you shall crave your neighbor's household, or field, or male, or female slave, or ox, or ass, or anything that is your neighbor's. Now that looks pretty similar, but it adds another word in Hebrew. So in English, it says, you shall not covet. Tachmod in Hebrew. But in our verse here in Exodus, there's only one verb, tachmod. But in Deuteronomy, there's another word which is translated here as crave, tit'aveh, which comes from the word ta'ava, or as it's said in Ashkenazic or Yiddish, a taiva. Anyone ever heard of that, a taiva?
Yeah.
What's a taiva? Do you know what? Tadeh maza? Maza? A craving, but like something that you lust for. Something that you lust for, something that trips you up. When we say taiva in halachic parlance, what we're saying really is, what are the things that trip you up? What is your issue? Is it gambling? Is it drinking? What's your taiva? What's the thing that gets in your way? And that's added here. So in the first part of Exodus, the only thing we're dealing with is things that your neighbor owns. In the second part, we say things that your neighbor owns, but we also mention that thing that is your issue. And everyone has their issue. Okay, whatever it is.
Doesn't that refer to the Eitzahara?
Yitzhahara, sure. That's exactly what it is. Right, the evil inclination. Very good, very good. Okay, now, we're running a little behind here, so I want to try to get through some of this. Because we don't have a microphone to pass around. Oh, we got it. How about that? Okay, Edith, would you? So, Maimonides, the Rambam, not our school, but the guy, he in his Mishnah Torah. So here's what happens, by the way. This is how halacha works. The Torah says, "Do not covet," and then you all had questions. Well, what does that mean? If I just walk by a house and I say, "Oh, that's a beautiful house," I don't want to buy it, but I do admire it. And if someone just said to me, "Would you trade that house for your house? You know, nobody harmed." Yeah, I would. It's a better house. You know, okay, that's admiration. How do we know what exactly the Torah meant? Because there's no way to know from "do not covet." It's too vague. So comes the Talmud, and rabbis argue about it. And some rabbis say it means this, and some rabbis say it means this, and in certain communities it meant this, and in other communities it meant that. And finally, in the Middle Ages, the rabbi said, "Listen, somebody's got to make a decision around here. And we're going to start writing down what has become the adopted rule of the Jewish people." And in some Sephardic communities, it was one way, and in some Ashkenazi communities, it was another way. And there were three main rabbis who started doing this. The first one, for those of you who have been to Morocco, the Rif, Rabbi Yitzhak Al-Fasi in the 11th century. It's the first one to ever do this. He wrote a big book saying, here's what all the laws are. But it was convoluted and hard to understand, and regular Jews couldn't understand it. So 150 years later, Maimonides set out on his own one called the Mishnah Torah, which was very beautifully written. And Maimonides, like the Rif, was Sephardic. And so it represents a Sephardic tradition. Another couple hundred years later, Jacob ben Asher writes the Torah, giving more of an Ashkenazic point of view. And now we have three codes of three rabbis who were considered the authority. And they differ a little. And some say, you know, if you say, I want to buy this house, you have committed a crime, you have committed a sin. And some say you have to actually knock on the door. And some say you actually have to start bargaining, and so forth. So Joseph Caro said, different Jews are doing different things. We need to have one law code. And in the 1500s, he wrote the Shulchan Aruch, and that became accepted by everybody. That's the law. But what we like to do when you're studying halakha is look at how these rabbis developed what the law meant and how they based their arguments. And then ultimately we can come to like an idea. Okay, so I've brought you some of them. One of the most authoritative is Maimonides in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Mishnah Torah, the laws of theft and lost property, 9 through 12. So I just want to run through what Maimonides says, and this is going to start to help clear up the questions. So if you just refer back to my opening for a second, if you came into my office and said, you know, Rabbi, tell me, am I a good Jew? Well, you know, I could say, well, you know, is your sukkah kosher? Did you go to Torah study and forget to say the blessing? Because then you have no hope, right? You know. Or do I say, how are you at lo tachmod? Do you walk around saying, I wish I had this, I wish I had that, and you'll see how it develops. So part of how we are as a Jew is very dependent on our ethical behavior, as the Torah instructs. So you could, all the live-long day walk around saying, I got the most expensive lulav in town, and my tefillin cost me $4,000, and you're using those raggedy old tefillin that your great-grandfather left you, that he never even used, and they're cracked and they're not kosher. But as I'm going to buy my $4,000 etrog, and an old man in the street asked me for money, I kicked him in the head. Whereas you, on your way to golf on Shabbos, gave him $100. So who's, Okay, so the answer is you have to do it all. You gotta, no, all right, but let's look into it. So here's what Maimonides says. Edith, would you take us 1:9? Anyone who covets.
Anyone who covets a servant, a maidservant, a house or utensils that belong to a colleague, or any other article that he can purchase from him, and pressures him with friends and requests until he agrees to sell it to him, violates a negative commandment, even though he pays much money for it. As Exodus 20:14 states, do not covet.
Okay, so Maimonides says there's a sin here. So here's how you say it when you go to yeshiva. How does Maimonides hold? How does he hold? What's the love? What's the sin? Where does the sin happen according to Maimonides? In 1:9. In his heart. Okay. Right. You have a watch. I love your watch. You don't want to sell me your watch. I say, okay. You see, that's how you treat your rabbi. That's the kind of person you are. I'm making you a fair offer. I'm giving you more than it's worth. Oh, it was your grandfather's watch. So what? Who doesn't have a grandfather? Come on, I'm making you a fair, right? Once you start the pressure, whether you end up getting the watch or not, that's the sin, according to Maimonides. To say, I love the watch, I admire the watch, no sin there. The sin doesn't occur until you start the pressure. Okay, that's Maimonides. You can take it or leave it, but that's his opinion. All right, so that's number 9. Let's go to number 10. Do you see, I've bolded them. They're sort of in a mishmash there. But if you look towards the right side of the page, you see 1:10. Judy, would you read 1:10?
Anyone who desires a home, a wife, utensils, or anything else belonging to a colleague that he can acquire from him violates a negative commandment at the time he thinks in his heart, how is it possible to acquire this from him? And his heart is aroused by the matter, as Deuteronomy 5:18 states, do not desire. Desire refers to feelings in the heart alone.
Okay, so now he takes it a little further and he says, once that feeling starts to bubble up inside of you where you go from, I like that watch, nice watch, to, I'm going to try and get that watch. Right? You want to get that watch? Go to Bloomingdale's or wherever they sell watches and buy the watch. But, once you start to figure out how can I get this watch from this guy, now you've gone from admiring to do not covet. The mitzvah is do not covet, right? Mitzvah, the commandment, do not covet. Okay, so this is Maimonides so far. We have a long way to go, but this is where we are so far. 1:11. Ken. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Are you trying to have a distinction between wanting it from a person as compared to going out and getting it in the free marketplace?
Yes, it's got to be this guy. So if I say, I love this watch, I really want to buy this watch, it's bubbling up in my watch, I'm going to go online and buy the watch, that's no sin. It's got to be from the person, right? So it's a very good point. Notice that the command here is, do not covet your neighbor's stuff. Your neighbor means the guy you're dealing with. Not the guy who lives next door to you that you've lived next to for 30 years that you never met. I'm not talking about that guy. I don't know, maybe some of you actually know your neighbors. Okay. My neighbor has a sign that says, guns don't kill people, I do, or something. So we're not, we're not that close. So, I don't know. So when the kids when the ball bounces over our fence, just leave it. Just leave it. All right, 1:11.
Desire leads to coveting, and coveting leads to robbery. For if the owners do not desire to sell, despite the offer of much money and many supplications by friends, the person motivated by desire will be moved to robbery. As Micha 2:2 states, they coveted houses and stole. And if the owner stands up against them to save his property, or in another way prevents the person motivated by desire from robbing, he will be moved to murder. Take, for example, the narrative of Achav and Navot.
Okay, so you could look in the Tanakh and see some examples of this, but I bolded the most important part. And this is where, desire leads to coveting, and coveting leads to robbery. So what does that mean? What is Maimonides saying there when he says desire leads to coveting and coveting leads to robbery?
It all leads to dancing.
Yeah. Could all. So, any ideas? Judy, do you have a mic?
It just seems to me that it's desire gone crazy, basically. It's excessive. And it's once your feelings are beyond the normal realm and you're overstepping, that's when you're really in trouble.
Yeah. So I think what he's saying is to desire. The mitzvah is don't covet. But once you start to covet, then that will lead to, okay, how can I get it? And then, if it's something you want to get, then you could have the idea that you'd want to steal it, and that's where the sin happens. So you have now do not covet. It's almost like a barrier. If you don't covet, then you won't desire. If you don't desire, then you won't steal. And if you don't steal, then you won't have the sin. But when we get, the rabbis explain in great detail that in the Ten Commandments where we have lo tignov, do not steal, it really means do not kidnap. Because it doesn't need to be do not steal, because do not steal is covered in do not covet. Did everyone get that? Do not covet in and of itself is do not steal, because if you don't covet, you'll never get to stealing. Nobody steals, well, some people do, because they're just nuts. But a logical person would not steal something that he or she didn't want. I mean, why would you? Now, sometimes you could just to hurt the other person. But in most cases, a logical person who steals something is because they want it, or they want to sell it. Yes?
I have a question. So, the portion seems to focus on physical things, don't covet physical things. Today, we live in an information age, and so somebody could want certain information. It's not a physical thing, and it doesn't matter what the intent is, but they want a physical, they want the information. Is that also covered in here, like coveting information? Oh, come on, how much is your mortgage? Oh, come on, how much do you make? Or whatever that is that information covered in here? Because I like to apply things to current day.
I would think so. Right. So, like, if I would think that. So, by the way, this is what rabbis today do, is they would say, well, listen, do you think this would be considered a sin? And so a rabbi would have to make a ruling. So, I would say, consult your local Chabad rabbi. That's what they always say on their website. But no, I would say it this way. So if you're trying to pry information out of someone who doesn't want to give it, how much money do you make? Come on, just tell me. I don't feel comfortable telling you that. Come on, what's the big... Once you get into that urge of trying to extract that information that doesn't belong to you, that's the sin. Yeah.
So these are about material things, and material things are material things. You don't have to have that wash, you can get a wash with that. But suppose you extrapolate this and go to the real heart of the thing. Suppose you covet his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he said, he can do a lot of things coveting his wife. He can do things that are absolutely horrible, so he can have his wife. That, it almost looks like they're doing stepwise.
Yeah.
You agree with this, you shouldn't do it, you bargain. This, you shouldn't do what you bargain. But if you covet, does it ultimately lead
Yeah.
to something that's horrific as a kid that you're going to take?
And what's the classic example? Very good, King David. King David saw a woman named Bathsheba, desired her, sent her husband, Uriah, to the front lines. Just happened, you can't believe it, but he died in battle at the front line. Oh, she's single, right? And she becomes the mother of Solomon.
Every time that story is told, my daughter's a T-BOM graduate, and so they told that story, and she raised her hand and said, I think it's really unfair that men could have more than one wife, but a woman couldn't have more than one husband, because then that never would have happened.
Right. Yeah. Okay, we have a lot to get to, and our time is growing short. This really is like a week-long course. So I really do want to get to this, but let's not. Yeah, go ahead.
So what if I covet something that I can't have? Like, oh, she has so many grandchildren. I only have 2. I wish I had more.
Yes, so, I don't think,
I stew about that.
yeah,
I can't do anything.
I don't think that would be a sin, because it's not like you actually, unless you wanted those actual kids, But no, although there is a sense of, I almost brought this where it says in the Pirkei Avot, Ezehu Sameach, who is happy? The man who's content with his portion, or the person who's content with his or her portion. So you may be breaking that issue there. Okay, last comment. Go ahead.
That's what I was going to say.
Oh.
I kind of look at this broader than that, as I think, when you look at the time, the Torah in this portion was written.
Yeah.
You didn't have Bloomingdale's where you could buy things.
Right.
And that it was really coveting by looking at your neighbor, that even though, in my view, it's the fact that you're not satisfied with what you have. If you want a watch, you go out and buy a watch, it's something you're not coveting because you can do it. It's something you don't have the ability to get.
Right.
That you covet, which makes you not satisfied.
Yeah, right.
So I take this, what I think, a lot further, because it's not, you have to manipulate someone to get it, but
Right.
it's the desire to get something beyond your means, which makes you not comfortable.
Okay.
And that's what it's all.
Very nice.
I view.
Yeah, very nice. So all these are well stated, and I'm glad we've developed some discussion here. This is halakha is fun, especially when it's talking about ethics and you're trying to figure out how you're supposed to behave as a Jew. I brought some of the classic sources here, but they're a little more esoteric than we usually have. So I'm just going to, in the Hebrew, read you just a couple of them very quickly, and then finish with the Ibn Ezra, who will hopefully make a point that we can maybe learn our own behaviors from, an idea there. So the Maggid Mishnah is a Catalanese, Catalan, which is Spain, 14th century. And basically, the Maggid Mishnah is one of the main commentaries on Maimonides. If you ever opened up the Rambam, the Mishnah Torah, you'll always see the Maggid Mishnah's commentary on the side. And this was his MO. If he couldn't find Maimonides' proof, Maimonides doesn't give his proof texts, which is so annoying, right? All the other scholars, they would tell you, here's where I got it. But Maimonides' viewpoint was, you don't need anything else. You don't need to go back to the Talmud. Just read me. So he didn't give footnotes. So the Magid Mishnah went back and said, Magid Mishnah means the Magid. I'm telling you the story of the Mishnah. What's the Mishnah? The Maimonides, the Mishnah Torah. So he said, if I can't find the reason why Maimonides came up with this or where he got the idea from in the Talmud or wherever, then I disagree with it. And so that's kind of how that was his MO, which is really fascinating. So here's what he says. Now, it's in Hebrew. It's only a little piece. I'll just read it very quickly and translate it. Aval hishtadlut. Hishtadlut is the effort that you make to do something. Okay? Aval hishtadlut asher hishtadel. The effort that you put forth to do something. Kedei lirtso to. In order to desire something. Hua iser. That in itself is the sin. Right? Yeah. To get what you want. V'nigmar b'shat hamekach. And the stamp of it, it's done at the time when you start the negotiations. V'ishtadlut lo haya ma'isa. And there's no action there. So depending on the type of action that you do would determine the penalty. So if there is an action, you actually did take the watch, you would get lashes, makot or malchus. There's a whole tractate in the Talmud called makot, all about how they would lash people and you would get punishment for your sin. But it wasn't so bad, but it wasn't enjoyable. Whatever, we're not going to get into makot right now. But the point is, according to the Magid Mishnah, it's not the desire in your heart. You're not guilty until you've started to make the effort to negotiate. Okay? So if I walk by someone's house and I say, "Ugh, I wish I had this house." You see where I live, where I'm living. Look at this. This is something. And you keep walking. No harm, no foul. But the owner walks out. You look quickly on Zillow. You see he's asking 27.6. I'll give you 27.5. No, I'm just kidding. Because it wouldn't be for sale in this case. If it was for sale, it wouldn't be a problem. But if it's not for sale and he doesn't want to sell it and you say, I remember when we were living in Fort Myers, we were watching TV and they had these homes for sale and this home came on for numbers that we thought were big until we moved here. But there was a home for like $20 million. And my dad said, "Yeah, but you could get it for 18." I come by it honestly. It's not. Many generations in my family have a bizarre sense of humor. All right. So according to the Magid Mishnah, his innovation on the Rambam is it's the act it's not the urge that bubbles up. It's once you start the negotiation, you violated the 10th commandment. Okay. By the way, you could ask, what is adultery? Is adultery a kiss? Is adultery just going to a movie? Does it have to be actual sexual? I mean, at what point? Now, that's a different class. I have that class. But okay. Yes, before my time. All right. What else? All right, here we go. Next one, Aruch HaShulchan. Okay, so the Aruch HaShulchan, 19th century, was a rabbi named Rabbi Epstein who tried to write a very concise summary of the Shulchan Aruch. And he says this, V'lav de lo taiva, and the love of not lusting after. So what do I want to say here? Okay, so what he says is, if I'm looking at the end of the first line, Mechashev belibo, you think in your heart, ech lehasiga mehechavero, how to acquire from your neighbor what you want. V'kivan shegomer davar ze b'libo. And at the moment that you've, in your heart, have started to think about the way in which you're going to do this, over alo titaveh. At that point, you have committed the sin of do not lust after. Okay. So what I pointed out is that the rabbis all see in the Torah, do not covet. But the Torah doesn't tell you at what point you've in fact coveted. And so we have three options so far. Is it the moment that you felt that urge in your belly that you want this thing? That's option one. Is it number two, at the moment that you devised, according to the Aruch HaShulchan, how to then go and get it? Or is it, according to the Magid Mishnah, when you actually begin the negotiation? So what I'm showing you so far is that three rabbis are very, have a very nuanced approach to at what point you've committed the sin. Okay, 2 more points, and then maybe we'll go on. Yes. Yes. Fourth option.
And I'm not a rabbi. Here's a fourth option. You start the negotiation, and your neighbor rejects it.
Okay.
At the point you come back, maybe the second or third time.
Yeah.
Then that's because you could make an offer. I don't think that's a sin. And then the neighbor says, no, I'm not interested. It's when you start nagging and coming back again and again, I think.
Yeah, okay,
Or
good.
it's another option.
Good fourth option. Very fair. Very fair. And it's more, Eileen, it's a much more sensible approach today than maybe in the 1200s. So it makes sense. Okay, a lot more points. Michael, and then Ian, and then Bobby, and then we'll just push everything else off for today. Yeah.
I'll give an offer that he can't refuse.
Oy vey. Okay. I think we already covered The Sopranos for this class. Yeah. Michael.
The phrase,
You have a mic?
the phrase, be careful what
Ian. Go ahead, Michael.
the phrase, be careful what you wish for,
Yeah.
because you may get it, comes to mind.
Ah.
And so, in personal experience, the things that I have coveted have rarely made me happy. And so there's an advanced understanding of who I am and what will make me happy. And then there's the shiny thing.
Yeah.
And rarely do those two things come together.
You know, so there are a lot of, very interesting, there are a lot of ways to look at this. So, you know, when we were living in Fort Myers, the one thing that we didn't have that I wanted was a den upstairs.
Yes.
A place where I could go up there and, you know, for whatever reason, is what I wanted. So we moved here. We got the den. So now I thought, you know, there's one other thing I might. Wherever I go, there's going to be one other thing. So finally, you know what I said? The hell with the other thing. Who cares? I got the den. You could always, and then there are the people who have everything. And, you know, so if you have everything all the time, at some point you're going to say, you know, it's not that exciting anymore. So, you know, if you know, I went to Bruce Springsteen the other night. So if you go to Bruce Springsteen and you sit in the front row, because you always sit in the front row, because you can, okay, after a while, it's not that big a deal. So I saw someone who sat in the front row, and I said, wow. And they said, yeah, you know, it's great. It's what I always do. So in the event that I ever get to sit in the front row, I'm going to enjoy it a lot more than that guy. Because when you have it all the time, it's not that exciting anymore.
So there are also those among us who earn a living by exploiting the things that we covet.
For sure.
They're plastic surgeons.
Right.
They're investment bankers, which is perhaps the most egregious example because there are these corporate executives who covet another company or another product, and it's the investment banker.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure. So we were in the last row. Someone said, well, you were breathing the same air as Springsteen. Well, I say, there's much less chance he was going to give me COVID than the guy in the front row because we were so far. I mean, I can't even say for sure that he was there, that we were so far. But, okay. Let's keep going. I'm sorry. One more point.
I think that negotiation is a slippery slope. If the person you're negotiating with says it's not for sale at any price, you've committed a sin. If he says, yeah, I'll sell it, this is the price, then I don't think that negotiation isn't a sin.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of nuances here. Let me point out two other types of sins that are mentioned by the rabbis, and then hopefully go to the Ibn Ezra to close with a point. So, Shari Tshuva of Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbeinu Yonah was a cousin of Nachmanides. So you're thinking 13th century, Spain. And he says this, V'achomed lakachat kol chefetz v'hu ish nichbad. So the person who covets, to take any kind of an object from an honorable person. Right, so, I'm sorry, the person who wants to take it is a very honorable person. She mishal she'ela, or panav lo yifilun, asor lishol. So, if you know that there's a guy who's like, if there's someone in your town who's like the local rabbi. I'm talking back when people appreciated and respected, a long time ago. It's the Rebbe, it's the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he won't say no. So you go up to him and say, I'd like to buy your watch. Even though that it was your great-great-great-grand, the founder of, Chabad's, and it was his, and it was, at one point it belonged to Rambam, and at one point it belonged to King David, and you say to him, I'd love the watch, and you know that he never says no to anybody. You're walking around, I got the Rebbe's watch. You're not allowed to do that. You can't go up to someone like that who you know is not going to say no and ask him for something like that. If you asked him to borrow a pencil, you asked him for a piece of gum, make sure it's kosher. But if you ask him something like that, fine. But you're not going to ask him for his great-grandfather's watch and say, I'm going to give you a price you're not going to believe, right? That you can't do. So that would be coveting and taking advantage of a situation. One last point. Here's another thing you can't do. Umatsui zeh b'chatan shemachbid al chotno kodem achatuna. So if you find a situation in which there's a guy who's about to get married and he goes to his future father-in-law, kodem achatuna, before the wedding, sheniten lo devar ploni v'ploni, and he wants him to give him something or other, masha lo hitnu, something that wasn't part of the deal, of the conditions of the ketubah that they've already said. So basically what happens is you're getting married to this woman in 2 days, and the father-in-law, the future father-in-law, has paid for this extravagant affair, and everyone's come in from out of town, and it's the day before the wedding, and you've already agreed that you're going to get 2 donkeys, a watch, and a hat. And you say to him, right as everybody's pulling into town, the caterer's been paid, I want a camel too. And he's got to give it to you, or else, if you don't give me the camel, I'm out of here. Good luck. It's going to cost you more to cancel this wedding than it will be to give me the camel. That's a sin. You can't take advantage of people in situations like that and covet what they have. Okay, now, all of that being said, There's a very famous and very long Ibn Ezra on our verse that offers the 10th commandment. And he makes a very interesting point. So I'll just read it here. Thou shalt not covet. And hopefully with this, we'll come to a conclusion and something that you can use to help you fulfill this commandment in a better way. Many people are amazed at this commandment. They ask, how is it possible for a person not to covet in his heart all the beautiful things that appear desirable to him? So, of course. So what he's really saying is, how can you legislate my thoughts? I can't even control my thoughts. I walk by and I see a beautiful woman and I say, wow, there's a beautiful woman. I'd love to be married to her. That came up in my thought before I even had the chance to say, don't think that. That's a beautiful car, that's a beautiful house, that's a beautiful whatever. I didn't even get a chance to say, don't think that, and I already thought that because that's my nature. I'm used to doing that. How can you legislate that? That's what the Ibn Ezra is asking. I will now give you a parable. Okay, so here we go. Here comes the answer. Note, a peasant of sound mind who sees a beautiful princess will not entertain any covetous thoughts about sleeping with her, for he knows that this is an impossibility. This peasant will not think like the insane who desire to sprout wings and fly for the sky, for it is impossible to do so. Now, we could read a lot more there, but this was the main point. And when people quote this, that's the line of this that they quote. And you can maybe read the rest of it on your own if you're interested. It is really interesting. But I think I've gotten to the point there that I want to say. Lots of kids dream about being able to fly. No one ever tries it. It's not something you try. People, maybe if you're, on hallucinogenic drugs or something and you think you're a bird or something. But, a normal person who's walking and says, it'd be really great if I could fly, I'm not going to go up to the top of a building and say, birds can do it. Why not me? Why not me? Nobody does that. It's such an insane idea that you wouldn't think that. Now, a peasant, so if you are, you go to see, some kid today goes to see Taylor Swift in concert, beautiful woman. So after the concert, he says, I'm going to give her a call. Maybe I'll go out there tonight, show her Miami. Nobody does that. Unless you're play for the Heat or something. But normal people, they don't do that. You're not going to be able to get her number. She doesn't want any part of you. It's not a thing. And that's the peasant and the princess. Now, you're at the concert. There's a beautiful woman sitting right next to you. That's more realistic, right? So you look at the woman and you say, okay, what are you doing after that, right? Now, if you're single and you're Jewish and she's Jewish, have at it. But that's more realistic. So what the Ibn Ezra is saying is, I think, the goal of do not covet is to train yourself to get to the point where the things that you covet are like flying. It's so foreign to you. You can't even imagine doing it. That you don't even think about desiring it because you would never do that. Does that make sense? So in other words, the goal is to say, all right, what are my weaknesses? My weaknesses are, technology. And I went to a friend's house and I saw he's got, the greatest TV and the whole setup and he's got a whole movie room and whatever. And, I don't have a room that could hold that. I can't afford that. I don't need that. The TV I have at home is fine. But it's now come into my head. You have this. I need this. Okay. So, and we all, whatever your weakness is, and if you don't care about technology, you would never say that. But, if you're a fisherman and you go fishing with someone and he's got the coolest rod you've ever had, and you've always loved your rod, but now you see, oh, he's got the 2GZ50, whatever. And even though I love this one, boy, that one. Hey, would you sell that? Okay, now it leads to, so the goal, according to the Ibn Ezra, is to take the things that you lust after, the things that are your issue, and get to the point where you look at it as if a rational person would look at trying to fly. It's so foreign to you that you would never even think to desire it or to try to covet it. And only once you get to that point have you refined your character to the point where you don't have to worry about this 10th commandment anymore. So I started off by saying the first 3 commandments, worshiping other gods, were there. Our characters are refined enough to know. Actually, I mean, the rabbis say that the Jews could never figure that out, and after the second temple was destroyed, after the first temple was destroyed, God removed the evil inclination from humanity, from Jews, to worship other gods. And so we don't do that anymore, but the first 3 we don't have to worry about. Keeping Sabbath, okay, that's more of a, we'll talk about that one. Honoring our mother and father, okay, fine. Nobody's really killing, kidnapping or committing adultery, I hope, but or lying in court. But this last one's tough. This last one, we all do it. And so the goal, I think, is to get to the point with do not covet where we are with do not worship any other idols. Worship this idol. No. Why would I do that? The stupidest thing I ever heard. You want me to bow down to a statue? Our ancestors lost the first temple because of that, because they couldn't stop bowing down to statues. We've gotten to the point where it's stupid. We'll never do that. But with the 10th commandment, do not covet, we haven't gotten there. And so what we have to do is get to the point where we don't covet what other people have at the same level that bowing down to idols is so absurd we would never do it. Only then, I think, is what the Ibn Ezra is saying and what the rabbis were trying to say. Don't even get to the point where you start the negotiations. Don't even get to the point where it starts to bubble up inside of you. You want to admire and say it's a beautiful home, fine. But don't even go further than that, because once you go further than that, then that leads you down the road of heading towards the sin. And so it's just as impressive to me if someone would say to me, I never covet what other people have. I'm very happy with what... Look, if you don't have food, this is not what I'm talking about. If you don't have food or a home and you desire people who have food or a home, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about basic necessities. Of course, you desire what you need to survive. But that's not what this commandment is about. This commandment is desiring what your friends have, when you have what you need to survive. And if someone could come into my office and say, I don't ever covet, that's well more impressive to me than saying I built the perfect sukkah. Because the perfect sukkah is 8 days a year. Do not covet is 24/7, all day long, every day. And that's how you start to refine your character, by using the wisdom of the Torah. Okay, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. All right, good to see you here. For sure.
dream, which are a subliminal,
It's a very controversial thing amongst the rabbis.
right, non-rational. I know I fell in love with theory not because of cover, but because I loved the idea of freedom. And that advanced way beyond what I thought the form.
And she wasn't married to someone else.
She wasn't
So
married
that,
to someone else.
if she was, that would have been a problem.
Right.
So, yes, your call. All right.
So
Good luck.
that last paragraph's like you have to try to harden your heart so that in a way so that you don't lust things.
Yeah.
You have to harden your heart so that you don't covet.
Yeah. Like
Make covenant.
building a fence.
Building a fence.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of look up the word the root mem dollar, and so there's Hamud and Thimud. Thimud is lust. Hamud is beauty or nobility.
Right.
So you have to sort of convert the Thimud to
Comes out. Right.
something like that.
Right.
Hey,
Good fact. Very nice. Very nice.
Expect an email on jealousy, envy, and covetousness from a philosophical perspective.
Okay.
Okay.
Fair enough.
You really engage the discussion with coveting, but there's a bright side and a dark side. The bright side is utopian Decalogue. The dark side of where your journey was going is when you wish to control thought. Once you get into thought police, you get along a very dark corridor of the Inquisition, of communism, of Chinese social control. So how does society adjust for a desire to covet? You don't want to go down that path, do you?
Well, to me, the Torah is not a communist manifesto.
Well, Torah is what it is.
Yeah, right.
It can be interpreted by many people.
Right.
Right now,
No, so we interpret it, and I think this is the beauty of Judaism compared to all these other failed systems, is that, each of these rabbis say, here's what I think about this in the 12th century.